Welcome back, wise women. You're listening to the Wise Women Podcast, Season 6, Episode 182. I'm your host, Alicia Wilford, and today I am talking about where I've been, what I've been up to, and where this podcast is going. So welcome back. I am sitting in my office, which is relatively new. This is an office that I have kind of put together since April. It all started with a cabinet, a metal cabinet that my dad had in my parents' basement that I gathered up last October. And I spent a long time refurbishing this big metal cabinet that my parents had had, my dad had had for my entire life. And I spray painted it green, and I took a lot of time refurbishing this. And I kind of built this entire office around that one piece that, if you are watching this podcast episode, is right behind me. But for those of you that are listening, it is three like repeating three drawers. I think there are like 15 rows of three, and it's very 70s, and it's green, it's beautiful. And so I knew I wanted this piece in this room, and I wanted this room to be a art studio slash recording studio slash office space, so that I could begin, I had been working at my dining room table for quite some time, and that was becoming a huge barrier to me having a life outside of work, and that I didn't have any room where I could just shut the door and leave work behind. And now I have an actual office where I can just shut the door and leave work just behind. So that's where I am, coming to speak with all of you. And it has been so long. I looked back, and the last podcast episode we did was in October of 2022. And I had intended to take a 1 month break from podcasting, and it's turned into pretty much a year of no podcast. And if I could go back and do one thing differently, it would be to realize that I wasn't going to be doing more podcast episodes for a year, and kind of let you all know what I was thinking and what I was doing. But life doesn't always turn out that way, does it? Things are so much clearer. Vision is 2020. When we look back, we can see all of the things that we should have done. Hindsight, it's a beautiful thing. Too bad we don't have it on the front end, right? So, for those of you that might be new to this podcast, you might be thinking, okay, who are you? What are you doing? What is the Wise Women Podcast? So I am Alicia Wilford. I am a coach. I work with women in any type of life transition, women who are feeling stuck, who are just feeling like something might be missing. You're needing some sort of change, job change, career change, mindset change. It might be that you feel like you've lost yourself and you're looking to come back home to yourself. No matter what it is, that's what I'm there for. And I use positive psychology techniques as well as creativity to help women specifically move through any type of life transition. And we are all always going through some sort of transition. And, we don't always need a coach for those transitions, but there are some big ones: divorce, job change, retirement, empty nest, or just feeling lost. That we do sometimes need a guide. And, no one can decide for you if you need a guide, but you know if it's time to ask for help from someone who will give you an outside perspective, a non-judgmental ear who can hold space for you while also giving you potential options and tools in your toolbox to move through that transition more quickly and with ease. So that's what I do. That's who I am. And this podcast, the Yoke and Abundance Wise Women podcast, started a long time ago. It started back in 2018. It was, I believe, spring of 2018 when this podcast launched. And I had been doing a weekly show interviewing and highlighting women who were doing something creative and living from a place of abundance. And really, I love talking to women who are, yeah, doing creative things, living from a place of abundance, and willing to have hard conversations, willing to swim in the deep end, women who are willing to have space, hold space for each other non judgmentally, and really from a place of open hearted curiosity. And I think that we can learn so much from each other. There is so much competition in this world, and I wholeheartedly believe that we rise by lifting others. That is a Robert Ingersoll quote. And really, I've kind of coined together we rise. And I believe that it is only together that we are able to do things well. And that's in a spirit of community over competition and really leaning on each other when we need to, when we realize that it's time to get an outside perspective. And so, my greatest hope is that when you come to this podcast, you know that you are hearing perspectives from really thoughtful people, really creative people, people who are working towards living life on their terms in the way that, for me, my core values are freedom, sovereignty, really, creativity, growth. Well, let me think about this for a second. Creativity, growth, I've got five of them. Divine or spirituality, that that sovereignty piece of things, and health. And so that's really what I value in my life. And those are the things that I'm constantly reevaluating and working towards and taking baby steps to come into alignment with. We talk a lot about core value. We talk a lot about the tools that I use with my clients to come into alignment with each of our own personal core values. And the reason why I went on sabbatical, I went on sabbatical for a number of reasons. So last year, I wrote and launched a book, Little Failures, and it's all about resiliency. It's about what happens when you don't get it right and you go after dreams, when what it takes to muster the courage to go after what's most important to you, and what happens then when you do it and you fail. Like, how do you get back up after that? And it was a lot. A lot has happened for me in a business perspective over the last year, and I was pretty exhausted. And on top of that, I have some mental health stuff that I was working through and some exhaustion. I was recently diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, which, I've had a number of people be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for that diagnosis because I finally have an explanation for why I've always felt the way I do, why I feel like I need more time than other people sleeping, and why like it's so hard for me to stay up past like 8:30, 9 o'clock, and like the excruciating feelings I have in my body and my mind. And it's like I have an explanation now for the first time in like 30 years of feeling pretty not great. And just understanding that I'm not crazy, that I'm not crazy. Like there is something actually going on in my body that is different than what is going on in the bodies of other people. And so it feels really validating to have learned that about myself. But learning how to take care of myself, I've had some mental health stuff, some depression. Getting on Wellbutrin has been really helpful. That actually helps with the fatigue quite a bit. And so after publishing Little Failures, I was pretty exhausted. I pushed it really hard in my business on a lot of different levels. And the level of burnout that I was experiencing was just over the top next level. So, what has happened is I kind of let go of everything that I didn't have to do. And the podcast was one of them. And even though it's one of my favorite things, I love being here and connecting with you and talking to you. And even though have loved it so much, it had become just one too many books on the pile. And I had to figure out how to prioritize myself. And, the things that had worked for me during the pandemic, I don't know that we're actually out of the pandemic, which feels slightly strange, but that had worked for my business during the pandemic. It took me a little too long to realize they were not going to work for me as we were coming out of the pandemic. So during the pandemic, people were excited to be online. They were excited to be in online communities. And it took me a long time to figure that out and to pivot towards something different. And so I was really grappling with a lot of really disappointing financial changes in my business. And as a single person, that can be really scary. And so trying to figure out how to balance those things and take care of myself and all of that, I was feeling lost and alone and stuck and not exactly knowing which direction to turn. And so I really just took a step back and I decided to take myself on a sabbatical. So to step back from marketing my coaching work, taking a step back from trying to put together any type of course or class or, anything like that. And I communicated that to anyone who is on my email list. And if you are not yet on my email list, please be sure to get on the email list. It will make sure you never miss an episode of this podcast. You will get all of the goodies that I share in my 5 Things Friday coffee break. And if I am offering any type of courses or books or products or groups, it means that you will be aware of those. But I also do lots of fun giveaways. I put together workbooks and fun downloadables that are really useful. And often, I give those away. So if you're on the email list, you will be sure to get those. And trust me, you do not want to miss out on that stuff. But, I went on this quote unquote sabbatical. So what did I do, right? I still had to earn money. Like I said, I'm a single woman. I don't have a trust fund. I don't have like a whole bunch of savings behind me. I've poured everything into this business that I do that I love. I do love the work that I do. I love the coaching work that I do. And I've loved this podcast. Like I said, I've loved being here with you. And I had to take a step back from all of that to evaluate and to understand what was going on, to understand what are things that people truly want in my work, in my business. But I still had to make money, right? I had to find a way to figure it out. So I fell back on a trade that I have. So I am a yoga teacher and I received my yoga training certification from the Asheville Yoga Center back in 2008. I started the training in 2007 and became a 200-hour certified yoga instructor in 2008. And so I have been doing a lot of teaching online, but I also went back to studio teaching, and that felt a little scary coming out of the pandemic, but it's been really wonderful. I am teaching at a local yoga studio in town, Radiance Yoga, and it's just been wonderful, as well as at the spa at a local hotel, the Grandover Spa. And it's been really fun to be teaching out in the wilds again on my terms, but not owning a yoga studio anymore. It's great to just be a yoga teacher and to come up with workshops and to be in person with people. It feels really nourishing and juicy. And I have been leaning into painting. and my creative side, my creativity. I have always loved creating. And what I have learned over the past 4-ish years, I've been painting a lot. And I have to talk about, you know, my watercolor teacher. So Sharon Larson, she came to me as a client, and after we worked together in a coaching capacity, she joined my morning writing group, Raw, and we ended up becoming pretty good friends. And she teaches a Thursday evening online watercolor class that has been instrumental to my growth and development as an artist. Sharon is one of the most incredible teachers. She approaches teaching in a very lighthearted, yet oddly serious but lighthearted way. She brings so much color and creativity and metaphor to how she teaches that when I sat down and I did it consistently, it was just one of the most beautiful experiences and gifts that I've ever given myself. And I really honed and developed that skill. I believe creating is a process. Creativity, oh gosh, don't get me started on creativity, right? I could talk about it for hours and the importance of cultivating our creative sides. And so I was doing that on my sabbatical. I leaned into my creativity like I have never leaned into my creativity before. I produced 2 collections, which is not necessarily what I expected to be doing, but it's what came out of my sabbatical. I created, for those of you that are watching, you will see this behind me, but I created a collection called the Parisian Collection, and there are 6 of my originals from that collection, behind me on the wall. And I created, I think there's 13 pieces total in that. And so I sold a number of originals. I've been selling prints. The Gleicky fine art prints that I've made from this original collection are stunning, stunning. I mean, what I think is so beautiful is that when you produce an original piece, just by nature of the amount of hours and time that you put into it, the price of an original can be pretty cost prohibitive. But with technology the way it is now, I can create a fine art print that you can purchase at a very reasonable price. And it's on this delicious paper that feels like watercolor, that looks like watercolor. And, it won't even fade the way a watercolor could fade if you don't have it under archival glass. So it's just really, really wonderful. So I produced the Parisian collection, and that collection was inspired by I went back in like May, I went to an art show in Winston-Salem, and there was a woman who had taken a lot of photography around Paris that's just next level beautiful. I mean, it makes me feel like I'm there. I could probably cover my whole office in her work. It's so gorgeous. And she was showing, and I bought couple prints of hers, and it got me really thinking, wow, I love Paris and I've been there a number of times. So why don't I paint Paris from my own photography? So I took the pictures that I had created and I used those as the reference photos for my pictures, and I then made all of these watercolors from that, and that's the Parisian collection. So that was one collection that I did, and it's just really near and dear to my heart. Paris has always been a really special place to me. And then I knew that I was gonna be showing some of my I had a booth coming up at the farmer's market, and so I thought, gosh, if I was shopping at the farmer's market and I saw an artist, what would speak to me? And I thought, oh, of course, I might wanna buy some fruits and vegetables, some pictures of fruits and vegetables. I might wanna buy some punny cards that have veggies on the front cover of the card. And I created a collection called The Farmer's Daughter because my dad grew up on a farm, raised on a farm, I spent a number of Friday evenings at my grandparents' house in the lane while my dad and my uncles and grandparents were picking vegetables, cantaloupe, muskmelon, really, and tomatoes or, gourds or pumpkins or what were corn, any number of things. And so it was really fun to create that collection and to think about my dad and my family and the farmers who make food possible. I mean, I think that it's really special that I grew up understanding what it takes to actually grow food to eat for large amounts of people. And I feel very lucky to have always known where my food comes from and what that means. And so that's what, you know, I chose to focus on in my paintings. And I created a number of very punny cards under the Farmer's Daughter collection. So I've been doing that. I've started teaching watercolor classes. And when it was time for me then to come back from this sabbatical, what I was struck by was that I didn't feel like I yet had any epiphanies around my coaching work. In September, I started teaching a watercolor class at my home. And I was really struck. A lot of the women started off by saying things like, I'm not creative, or I'm not good at this, or I'm not an artist. And it struck me in the heart so much because I believe that creativity is everything. I believe that each and every one of us, if you are listening to this, you are creative. There is a really big difference between artist and creative, although I do, to a certain extent, think that all of us are artists in our own way. It might be how you choose to keep your house, it might be how you organize your closet or get dressed up in the morning. It could be the way you plant a garden or cook your meal for yourself or your family. There are so many different ways of being creative. The way we think can be creative, and oftentimes we don't even see our own creativity. So, teaching this watercolor class and just hearing the first thing out of everyone's mouth being like, oh, I'm not creative. It was heartbreaking to me. And it was a stark reminder of just how important the work that I do in this world is. Now, here's the thing. I know that creativity, that getting in touch with our creativity is an initiation into spirituality. It's an initiation into a deeper level of personal development and self acceptance, understanding, healing, processing. I know that when you sit down to create or make, and that can be something artistically speaking, or it can be just something creative, that we are asked to meet ourselves on a deeper level. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you sit down to paint and all of a sudden the gremlins in your head begin screaming at you and getting louder and louder, telling you that you are not creative and that you're not good at something, or any number of things can come up. And whatever is coming up for you as you approach that means that you are that's what you bump up against in life regularly. And so when we create, when we meet that, be it on a page if we're writers, or, at the blank page when we begin to paint or create something, then it really is an opportunity for us to address places that we have opportunities for growth. And I think that is tremendously important. And that is the crux of what I do as a life coach working with women in transitions. And I realized in that moment what a ginormous need there is for the work that I do in the world. Now, that means that I have to, we as women, often what I know about women and personal development is often this is not something that we are willing to spend a lot of time or money on, especially if we think it's going to take us away from our families or take time or money away from our families. Even though I know that when we do this work, when we create this space and time for ourselves, it enhances every other relationship we have. It it strengthens our relationship with ourselves as well as the relationships around us, and it makes us just better citizens of the world. It makes us better friends and family members. So, yes, I see what a tremendous need there is for the work that I do in the world. And I have not quite figured out how to sell and package that in a way for people to understand just how much they need it, because this is the type of thing that you come to it when you are ready for it. I can't convince you that you are ready for this, but you have to say, yep, I'm in a transition, or yes, I know I need something. And that, what you're talking about, is sparking something I need. So I did create another course, Creative Magic, that is beginning in October. It is open right now. Um, it is a 4-week course, and it is going to be around writing and creating and using creativity to meet ourselves on a deeper level. And I'm so excited to be sharing that with everyone. So that's me coming back from sabbatical. It is sharing courses like that and approaching my work in personal development as a coach from that perspective of deeper creativity. So that's where I'm at. Some of the lessons I've learned while I have been on sabbatical, one of the biggest lessons that I learned was that creativity is everything, and it's critically important to who we are and how we approach life. And it has just reminded me just how important process is, and embracing process over the outcome, and allowing yourself to put in the time and the work to get good at something. I didn't realize that I was doing it, but I was putting in time and work to get good at watercolor. I do think I can say I'm good at watercolor, but I didn't always feel good at watercolor. However, I put in the time and the energy and the years of work at it to get me to where I am at this time. And now I can share that with others. And much like yoga, I was always taught with yoga that if you start seeing how beneficial yoga is for your mind and for your body, it becomes your responsibility to then share that with others. And that looks very different for all of us, right? So sharing it with others might be asking your best friend or your parent or your family member to go with you to a yoga class. And that might be the extent of it. And then for others, it might mean becoming a yoga teacher. And so I really believe that when we find something that we see as beneficial, it means sharing it with the world, and in whatever way our talents allow us to do that. So that is what I've been up to on the sabbatical, and a bit of what I've learned from sabbatical. There have been some additional lessons as well, and yet it leads me a little bit to what's next? What is next for yoga and abundance? So I'll start out by saying the one thing that I did not get to do as much of on my sabbatical as I hope to is writing. I did a good amount of writing, but I didn't do enough writing. I still have a second book in the works, and maybe an idea for a third book that might need to come first, even. There's something, Little Rituals is the book I'm referring to, the second book. And the thing that's interesting about Little Rituals is that I am excited about it. I think I have a lot to say. And yet there's something in me that feels like there's a bit still life unlived that needs to be lived before I can finish writing little rituals. I don't quite know what that is because I haven't lived it yet. But I do feel like there is something there that needs to happen. Now, in the meantime, I think I do want to write a book about creativity and painting and watercolor specifically, and how what I'm learning in painting and teaching watercolor, how I think that applies to everything that I talk about in my coaching program. So that is something that I'm thinking about pretty actively, and that's some of the stuff that's next. I'm looking to bring back the Yoke in Abundance book club. That is something we have done in the past, and I'm excited to just be more in community with all of you. So that's where we are. I'd love to know what you want to hear from from us, but thank you so much for being here, for listening, for coming back. If you have enjoyed any part of this, if any part of this has touched you in any way, please share it with a friend. And I will look forward to seeing you again next week.